Hi, my name is Noah and welcome to episode 1 of MTB Crash Analysis. In this series, we'll talk about how our crashes happened, how we can learn from it, and what to do next time. In this episode, we'll be looking at my crash at Stromlo Bike Park. So for a bit of backstory, back in April, myself and two friends, AJ and James, headed up to Stromlo Bike Park in Canberra for the first time. Coming up onto day one, we were all pretty stoked. We'd never been to a place like this, so it was all a pretty new experience. All three of us are pretty solid intermediate riders. You'd often find us on blue trails and, getting a bit worried on black trails. Coming up from Sydney, we only had 2 days to get the most out of Stromlo Bike Park as we could. We tried our best to cover the mountain and to see everything that Stromlo had to offer. On our first run at Stromlo Bike Park, we had a local guide show us down the mountain. He showed us the best ways to go down certain things, the conditions at Stromlo, and the place as a whole. We finished day one very stoked, with only a couple bruises. The next day, it was 8 AM and we were ready to progress faster on the more common blue trails like Pork Barrel and Skyline, and maybe even progress onto some of the black trails like Three Amigos. We were anxious about one thing though: time. At Stromlo, the hours fly by, and before we knew it, it was 5 PM. That means we'd been riding for 9 hours. The sun was ascending quickly, and so were we. The minutes were closing in, and our normal loop sort of looked like this. First, we'd start up at Western Wedgetail and come down to Skyline. Go on the container bridge and take Trebuchet, and that'll take you right down to the bottom. After a long day, it was coming down to our last couple laps. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Mountain bikers with grain cells know not to take the last lap. We'll come back to that later. But we lack those brain cells, and here you go. So let's see what happened. Here we are using our last bit of energy to climb to the top of Old Duffy's Ascent. So half asleep, we begin our final lap. Coming down Old Duffy's Ascent, we can see here that I'm not really paying attention to where my bike is going. And you can see that I just go off the trail a bit and hit that little rock feature and get in the air accidentally. And in doing that, I clap my fork. So that was a little energy boost right there. And then I come to the end of Old Duffy's Ascent, and I'm like, oh, something's a bit wrong with my fork. So now I've got two things to worry about. I can't really tell what's going on, and my fork is just not working anymore. So nevertheless, we move on to Skyline. AJ and James have moved on a bit to the distance, and by now I've probably done this trail at least 30 times. Everything seemed okay until I came up to these rollers here. I made the late decision to pump the rollers, and that resulted in me pushing down my front wheel into the start of the second roller. If I were paying attention to my weight distribution, I might have been able to save this incident. But it all happened pretty fast and I was too tired to act on it. After horribly hitting the rollers, it left my weight leaning on my bars and dragged my body to the rocks ahead. Those with my arms out front, that isn't just instinct, that's just my body flopping over the bars because I'm not really acting on anything. So now I'm at the rocks and I just took a little clip to my head whilst going over the rocks, and then that didn't stop my bike and my force from just keeping on going. Then the front wheel clipped the rock, removing the strain from my waist and flinging my back towards the boulder ahead. My back then took all the impact of the rock, bringing me down to the ground. That's where the crash ends and the drama starts. I was totally winded and it took a solid 2 minutes for me to get my breath back. In that time, AJ and James had made it down to the start of Trebuchet, and that's about 2 kilometers down the trail. That would mean that I would have to call either AJ or James to climb 2 kilometers all the way back up the trail, get me out of this entanglement of bushes and help me back to the top.
James?
And so that's what happened. James ran up the trail and found me hidden behind this rock and helped me out of the spot. It was a much quicker climb back up to the top instead of walking back down, so we tried our best to stick to the other side of Skyline to get back to the intersection at the top of the trail. Opposite Skyline is this fire road. We figured that it would lead us back up to the top and we wouldn't get in the way of any other riders. Luckily that plan worked, and I waited at the top for James to go back down the trail to the start of Trebuchet, where he would get his bike, do the last section of Trebuchet, and then come back up.
Alright, me and James are just wrapping up the last little bit of today, going down Trebuchet. Unfortunately, Noah had a stack, so he's not with us. He's gone up to the top. But yeah, this is it, the end of Stromlo.
Once in the car, we still didn't really know what was going on. I was showing a few symptoms of a broken vertebrae, so we went to the nearby hospital. So what happened? Well, luckily there was no major damage in my spine, like a fracture, but my back was still a bit messed up. It took about 8 weeks to get cleared for casual road biking again. And what did we learn from this experience? Well, don't take your last lap, because you're bound to stuff up somehow. And this is because you're often tired, you've got fatigue, and you're just not making decisions like you'd usually do. Also, you're all pumped up on adrenaline, and that's just a bad combination if you want to keep safe and stay alive. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Feel free to watch our Stromlo video to check out the full experience and all of our other crashes and fails and everything like that.